Well, this summer, Father Aron Maghsoudi, pastor of All Saints Parish in Boswell, Holy Family Parish in Hooversville, and Our Lady Queen of Angels Parish in Central City, has been highlighting sacred worship sites here in our diocese and in neighboring dioceses. Today, another installment.
A church that stands out in a powerful way. A church that shows that very beatitude of Christ where he says, "Blessed, how fortunate, how good it is to be merciful," is here in the little tiny coal mining town of Footdale in western Fayette County. This church, known as St. Francis of Assisi, but originally founded as St. Thomas Church, was established in 1901. A first church was built in 1903. That church burned, and this is the second church. It is a magnificent church built of Romanesque and Spanish mission-style elements. In the tiny town of Footdale and the surrounding countryside, it rises like a cathedral for miners in the coal fields of western Pennsylvania. But it's also a powerful sign of God's mercy, a powerful reminder to engage our senses, maybe a sign of contradiction, something that contradicts a cold and fallen and broken world, and it stands as a powerful sentinel of a different reality. On the high altar behind me, you'll see St. Francis of Assisi in the middle, but on the sides, in the niches, you see St. Adalbert and you see St. Stanislaus, bishop and martyr. Both of them were figures who are deeply rooted in the Polish expression of faith. When Father Pacic came to the United States and he came to serve in this church, he was inspired to build a peculiar and unique shrine to another great figure of Polish faith, and that is St. Maximilian Maria Kolbe. If you're not familiar with his story, St. Maximilian's story is one of great import. Born in Poland, he was highly educated. He had 2 doctorates from Rome, one in theology and one in philosophy. He was a prolific writer. He used the media of his day in ways to engage and teach the faith. Eventually, he would go to Japan, where he established a monastery and a Catholic community that was very vibrant. He would return to Poland, but because of his tenacious personality, because of his fearless faith, because of his influence, he was arrested like many others and taken to the concentration camp at Auschwitz, where he was sentenced to hard labor. Now, while Father Kolbe was at Auschwitz, a prisoner escaped, and that prisoner escaped successfully. In order to break the morale of the prisoners, in order to affect them psychologically, and in order to show retribution, the authorities decided that they would execute 10 random prisoners in the place of the one prisoner who escaped. 10 random prisoners who did nothing wrong were picked out of the lineup that day. Now, one of those men, his name was Franciszek, or Francis Guy of Nietzsche. When he was called out, an innocent man going to be executed, he began to cry out, and he said, I have a family, I have a wife, I have children. The man did nothing wrong. Can you imagine that pressure? Father Maximilian Kolbe thought with the eyes of mercy. He thought about that man's life. He thought about his children. He thought about his wife. He thought about another person's life. And he stepped out of line and he asked to take his place. They let Maximilian Kolbe take Francis Guy of Nietzsche's place. He and the other prisoners were marched off to a bunker where they were starved to death. But while they were in that starvation bunker, a slow and painful death, Father Kolbe didn't give in to despair, which is so pervasive and so powerful and so crushing. He sought instead to build their morale. They sang, they prayed, they supported each other. They were a living sign of contradiction. Don't we need that today? A living sign of contradiction, because if you're not going to see it from us, then where are you going to see it from? Other people. Pass the buck. It's somebody else's responsibility. No, I'm going to see with other people's eyes. I'm going to see what needs to be seen. When the other prisoners died, Maximilian Kolbe was the last one who was alive. He had not yet died, and they injected him with carbolic acid, and his body was cremated, and his ashes were strewn to the 4 winds. Knowing this story, Knowing the importance of this, Father Pudgick built a memorial here in Footdale, a unique shrine dedicated to St. Maximilian Maria Kolbe. A powerful reminder, a sign of contradiction that teaches us about the need for mercy that we need not only to receive in our life and have received from God and from many others, but the gift of mercy we need to show as well. When Father Pudgick designed this shrine to St. Maximilian Kolbe, he designed it in a very peculiar way. It's a most atypical structure because it looks like the bunker where St. Maximilian Kolbe was executed. You'll see at the top barbed wire. It is a jarring image, but it's a powerful image that reminds us of something we all need to see. That in the end, when we feel overwhelmed, we feel far from home, when we feel, as the prodigal son felt, that he was in the great emptiness, that there is goodness that triumphs, that even in the face of evil and despair and death, there is real goodness, lest we ever forget that. A living witness to that reality of a higher and greater goodness happened here when this shrine was dedicated. There were scores of people here that day, back in the 1980s, when this shrine was dedicated. But one guest in particular stood out. And that man, at this shrine, was Francis Guy of Nietzsche, the very man whose life was spared by the mercy, the goodness, the sacrifice of St. Maximilian Kolbe. Francis Guy of Nietzsche was a man who lived to see his release from Auschwitz. He was a man who lived to see his family. He was a man who lived to breathe air as a free man. He came here on the day this shrine was dedicated to this little coal mining town in Fayette County as a living witness to God's incredible mercy. All of our lives are a share in the cross. One of the windows here has a statement in English, and it says the same thing in another window in Polish. And that statement is something that we should consider, and that is why a visit here, a pilgrimage here, is so important. Without sacrifice, there is no love. We oftentimes think of love in terms of things that are superficial. To quote the words of another victim of the Holocaust, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, cheap grace. Spare us all a gospel of cheap grace, of a superficial faith, of something that lacks depth. You see here in the story of St. Maximilian Kolbe the incredible cost of love. We're told that God is love, a love that moves the universe. And that's something that really is powerful. Don't cheapen it. Without sacrifice, there is no love, a love that looks beyond itself. Interred in the wall of this shrine are ashes, remains from people that were executed at Auschwitz. So much evil, so much degradation. But yet, for those that believe in mercy, there is goodness that is more powerful. How fortunate and how blessed we are if we can see with another's eyes. If the evil ends with us, just because something is possible, yeah, we can hold a grudge, we can be angry, we can return evil for evil, we can be selfish, we can justify just about anything. But unless it ends with us, where does it end? How fortunate we are if we, like St. Maximilian Kolbe, if we, like Christ himself, show mercy and compassion. We have received it, and we have the strength to give it.
And more from Father Maghsoudi as summer continues.